Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. As you know, I like big books and I cannot lie. You've seen my top 10 big books video, you've heard me do some reviews one-off like You Bright and Risen Angels, Fathers and Crows, and other such books. You know that I've got some upcoming videos rereading Infinite Jest, Gravity's Rainbow, Novel Explosives, and then for the first time coming up, which I'm very excited about, I've got Women and Men, I've got 2666, I've got, let's see, Miss McIntosh, My Darling. But I just also, if you've been watching along, or maybe you've been part of the reading group on Twitter, I also just finished Robert Musil's The Man Without Qualities. This is a 1774-page modernist novel. It is extraordinary. I have 3 videos out here about it so far, and then I've got a 4th one that's a little over an hour, and it's given me a lot of editing trouble. I'm about to just throw it out there raw because only the people who are really interested in it, as Rick Harsh says, my Musil Heron, are probably the only ones who are going to watch it anyway, so I might just throw it out there raw because there's some pretty crazy folks. But in any case, when I posted on Goodreads my reading status on The Man Without Qualities, I got this comment from a user on Goodreads, just goes by the name James, and he says, "I really wish I had your tenacity when it comes to reading long books like this. I haven't read anything over 1,000 pages since I was 19, and parenthetically he cites that was Infinite Jest, and killed off all the published pension from then till age 23. That was a devotion to quitting hard drugs." Well, I can say that is, like I told him, not to cheapen his experiences here, but that is really quite an argument for reading pension there, isn't it? That pension saved him from relapsing back into drugs. Then he says, "I read The Recognitions at 26 after the breakup of a long relationship." So sounds like the guy's been through life in its valleys and so on, and literature, big books, you know, they've been a big part of that. So that's a big argument, and it actually does tie into some things I'll talk about. But then he says, "It takes passion, doesn't it? Serious devotion, possibly some that you take for granted. You could really serve the community by making a video that talks about how to tackle long works like this. Could be a great motivator and educational tool for many people of many ages." And you know what, James, I completely agree with you, as I commented back. That was from February 17th, and now I'm getting around to it. So this video will cover, well, first of all, this video is about reading big books, and the intended audience for this video would be someone interested in reading a big fiction book for the first time, but who is daunted by the prospect of it. And so we'll break down what we mean, the salient terms in that statement about the intended audience would be big, fiction, and first time. Now this can transpose over into nonfiction pretty easily, but some of it will be specifically for fiction. So our agenda for this video, first of all, I want to sort of define what I mean in this video by a big book, then why you should go about reading one, and then finally how to read one. Examples of big books, the way I mean it in here, just to rattle off a bunch, would be Proust, Musil, Richardson's Clarissa, The Mad Patagonian, Knausgaard's Mein Kampf, Gravity's Rainbow, Infinite Jest, Duck's Newburyport, Miss McIntosh, My Darling, Don Quixote, Novel Explosives, 2666, JR, The Recognitions, The Brothers Karamazov, Terra Nostra, and pretty much everything from William T. Bowman. So let's use a rubric to try and narrow in and home in on what I mean by a big book. There are 4 qualities that I'm focusing on: physical size, length, depth, which means depth of content, complexity, and then aesthetic, the way in which it presents that complexity. So let's take a couple of examples and start to chip away and see what we're talking about here. There's the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which to me satisfies only physical size, which of course is arbitrary. It's kind of cheeky that I'm using it, and depth. As far as length and aesthetic, it's lacking. The Mystery Doc. As far as physical size, it's average for a hardcover. Length is deceptive because though it is 1,600 odd pages, the aesthetic makes it read like a 300-page novel. But as far as depth and aesthetic, it also has that. So it's lacking physical size and length technically, but it has only depth and aesthetic. Ishmael basically just has depth. Physical size, length, and aesthetic are lacking for a big book. Bottom's Dream is the only one that has it all. It has physical size, length, depth, and aesthetic. But if we take this as our exemplar for big books like we're talking about, then this is going to be for a very, very narrow audience and only relevant to a very, very few books. Autobiography of Red, which is, you know, both a poem and a novel, sort of like Pushkin's Eugene Onegin. Onegin, off again, sorry. Anyway, Autobiography of Red basically has depth and aesthetic, just like the Mystery Doc. And then B.S. Johnson's novel in a box, The Unfortunates, which is really cool. This New Directions version is awesome. I'm gonna make a video about this one by itself. But anyway, this one basically just has aesthetic, in my opinion. So physical size is of course arbitrary. I mean, with some true big books like I'm talking about, you've got Laura Warholic by Theroux, you've got the final volume of Knausgaard's My Struggle, and then you've got Stephen Dixon's Frog. And as you can see, they're just, the sizes are completely, you know, arbitrary. Length is of course a foremost property. That's the thing we're gonna look at first when we decide, you know what, I'm sick and tired of hearing everyone talk about and gush over Gravity's Rainbow. I'm gonna get on this thing, and then one of the first things you're gonna do is you're gonna look and say, okay, it's 700 and some odd pages, almost 800, somewhere in there, and that's gonna tip you off. This is a big book, long. So I'm going to, after much thought, I'm gonna set my target length at 700 pages or greater. Unfortunately, we just lost Crime and Punishment and Moby Dick, which are rightfully big books, but so be it. Depth, this means that the content is dense and complex enough that it will overwhelm your comfortability with what it has to say. And then aesthetic, the way in which it presents its depth draws attention to itself. The aesthetic is, in a sense, itself a character, as some critics have noted about Joyce's Ulysses. I'm not going to go on and on about my definition of a big book because there are people who have done it better. Check out Tom LeClair's Systems novel. Check out Franco Moretti's World Text. Check out Frederick R. Carl's mega novel. And if you really want to get into some tasty academic babble, check out Stefano Ercolino's Maximalist novel. I quite like that book, but people who point out the fact that it is a garden salad of academic neologisms are absolutely correct in what they say. All right, so let's talk about why read a big book. We pretty much know what it is. We know what I'm talking about. Well, there's nothing wrong with that sense of accomplishment. You know, shorter books do give you a quicker sense of accomplishment, but it's very ephemeral. It won't last long. It is a way to get it quickly and to feel like you're reading a bunch of books, but I argue for quality over quantity. Marx was certainly right when he said that quantity affects quality negatively. With big books, you get a less frequent sense of accomplishment, but a much greater sense of accomplishment. And so this is actually a great way, reading big books, taking on a big book is a great way to help you temper that drive for instant gratification and to have greater goals. The probability of enjoyment is higher. If a big book has made it all the way to publication, that means that it has made it through all of the various stages of proofing and editing, and reviewing and so on. This means that editors have actually taken time to work with it, or to at least argue with the writer. Of course, there are some anomalies. There's probably, there are at least anomalies with every single proposition I could throw out there, but A Naked Singularity was essentially self-published. De La Pava did use Ex Libris, which is sort of glorified self-publishing. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. The probability of enjoyment is also higher because it probably has a strong following from people outside the mass marketing or the mass market who fervently desire to read big, complex, greater books. Spending more time with a book is like spending more time with a person. It is fruitful if you want to have any kind of relationship. The more time we spend with anything, the more we begin to see its layers, to see what it's doing, instead of just being, put off by the perceived hermeticism of the book. You're opening yourself to its worldview. A big book is usually big because it needs space to establish its unique world or its unique Weltanschauung. So, with smaller books, that unique world is usually presented via more impressionistic means. So you get these broad strokes and these impressions and so on, which is great and highly effective. But with a big book, it's more exhaustive, it's more maximalist, and it takes a lot of space because it has a lot to say, and usually a very specific way it wants to say it. All right, so let's talk about probably the reason why you clicked on this video anyway: how to read a big book. And these are culled from my reading of reading books, Mortimer Adler, How to Read a Book, Susan Wise Bauer, The Well-Educated Mind, and then a glut of others that are pretty much saying the same things. I'll touch on some of those, but this is just me being very open about my approach. So preparing for the book. Let's say you've picked out the book. You've decided that you want to read Karl Ove Knausgaard's My Struggle, this last volume. So it's going to take, you're going to need passion, determination, and commitment. So if you're not passionate about it, you're probably not going to make it very far if you put up a wall right from the beginning. So here's the first thing I would do. Don't go and read other people's reviews, okay? Because, if you read, let's say you're scrolling through and you read 10 really high reviews, you're going to get amped, right? You can be like, oh, okay, this is great. I want to see what all the excitement is about. Then you get to that one-star review where the person just trashes it. And there's usually with negative reviews, there's very little substance. So they're appealing to that, emotional part of you. And they're saying things like, if I could give it 0 stars, I would. And this is a waste of time, needs an editor and all that. Chances are it had an editor, and the editor knows what they're doing. But, anyway, like Stephen Moore says, usually negative reviews do no good. It's just a way for the reviewer to kind of show off some things that they know about, or clever ad hominems and so on, because they didn't understand the book. So stay away from those, because those are going to give you predispositions that aren't even your own. You can think, you can read, obviously, and you can think for yourself. So don't go out there and let other people affect your judgments before they even start. You can bring your own sentiments and judgments to the book. So get in that mindset of openness and determination that, I have my own unique view and I can think critically on my own. I'm going to approach this and say, let me see what this person has to say about things. Let me enjoy the way they have to say it. So, in other words, start off positive, giving the benefit of a doubt. Also, know that it is going to take you a while to get through. This book is going to take over your life for a while. So look at your daily schedule. How can you change your daily schedule to accommodate, say, an hour of reading a day? Can you set an alarm to get up earlier than usual and read it? Can you add it to your current morning routine? Can you read it on your lunch break? For me, I often go and sit in my car for an hour on my lunch break and read. And then learning to read in sips and swallows. This is something I got from, I think, Stephen King's book on writing, his nonfiction book about the craft of writing. And a great memoir too, by the way. It's a fantastic book. I don't care what you think about King. It's a great book. And he talks about how important it is to read and how he learned to read in sips and swallows. So he keeps a book with him if he has to stand in a long line in public, which of course is happening less and less these digital days. But he would pull it out and learn how to just take a sip of a book. So that means, to me, I've joked around about how I try to read even one sentence of a book at a red light. And that means that go into it not already perturbed that you're not going to get to sit there and hammer out 500 pages or whatever in one sitting, but that I'm going to focus on what this one sentence has to say, and I'm going to read it slowly and deliberately. And then also nighttime reading. That works for some people and not for others. Some people that puts to sleep, but perhaps you can, instead of watching your favorite Netflix show, to wind down, which is really bad for you anyway because of the blue light on your eyes, read goals. So quantitative goals. I look at a book and I calculate, like, okay, if it's 1,000 pages, how long will it take me to finish it if I read 20 pages a day? Okay, that's a little longer than I want to spend with it. I'm going to get more aggressive. Let's look at 30 pages a day, and so on. Let me just spend a month on it, whatever. And then use those, and then you have a goal, and you can say, okay, I know that I'm going to read 20 pages a day. I only have, 15 minutes here, 20 minutes here, 10 minutes here. Break those up, read 5 pages here, 5 pages here, 10 pages here, and so on, and know that you've got that for the day, and feel that sense of accomplishment with having achieved that daily goal. Don't feel like, oh man, because I didn't read 100 pages today, it's going to take me forever. Remember, the book, this is part of your life right now. This also brings up a good point about paying attention to pages. A friend of mine, Andy Roy, he recently posted about how he's just going to forget about page numbers. And just know that even if he reads 10 words a day, eventually he will finish the book, because like he and I were talking about, when it comes down to it, it's all about reading the pages. Like, no matter what bag of tricks you employ, it all comes down to reading the book. It is a deliberate action of sitting down, putting everything else aside, and reading those pages. And so for him, it's probably going to be helpful that he just forgets about the page count and just reads his fill each day. Other people I've heard about people actually chopping off the top ½ inch of their copies of Infinite Jest so that they don't even pay attention to page number, but just the content. For me, I'm a bit more aggressive with my goal orientation. It also gives you a big plus if you do end up having more time in your day and you can read twice your daily goal. You've now just bought yourself a day. So reading the book, during the process of reading it, live in the present. This is going to really teach you how to live in the present, because your mind is going to want to think about all the other stuff that you want to get to. But you're going to build willpower. Allow the book to talk to you. This is something that a guy and I were talking about on Goodreads. He read the provisional biography of Mose Eakins, and there's a lot about interruptions and terrible conversation in there where people can't even hear the meaning of your words. Evan Dareth calls it imparlance, and you've heard about people who are poor conversationalists. They're not listening to what you're saying. They're already formulating what they want to say, or perhaps that's how you are. I'm bad about that in conversation. But we have to allow the book to unfold and to talk to us. That's a proper conversation. So instead of sitting there constantly trying to figure out every single thing the author's trying to do, or constantly assess, critically, using some theoretical lens, like what this may mean, what that may mean, give it time to talk. Wait until the end of a chapter or a big section to start assessing your own thoughts. There are going to be lots of distractions. Life. Accept that certain things are more important and will come up. Your family, your friends, health, work, etc. Prioritize these things. I'm a huge reader. I can get lost in a book for days. But please prioritize life. Your friends and your family, they're obviously more important. Your health is more important. Exercise, for crying out loud. I'm bad about this, so I'm harping on it because I'm mainly talking to myself here. I can disappear from the public eye at the hands or pages of a book. But I remember reading in some rules on writing from Chuck Palahniuk a long time ago. He said that if he could give one salient piece of advice, it would be to spend time with your friends and family as much as possible. Don't prioritize your writing and your reading over that. Other books, those are distractions you need to put aside. They'll still be there when you're done reading this big book. Don't jeopardize your time with this one. Stop browsing Goodreads if you have to. Stop watching my videos on YouTube if you have to. And stop browsing Amazon if you need to. Just focus on this book. If you're like me, sometimes you're in the middle of a big book that's taken over your life and you're already thinking of all the lists of books that you want to get to when you're done, or you're sitting here and books from your shelves are screaming at you. And this is going to diminish your time with the current book. So put all those aside, because I guarantee you that you'll be happy you did. In the end, when you're not only saying, hey, I've read Infinite Jest, but rather I really spent time with Infinite Jest, is going to be much more fruitful. Eliminate all distractions. During your actual reading time proper, put your phone in another room, turn the TV off, etc., etc., etc. You can look up stuff later. Some people have said, I need my phone with me so if I hit a word I don't know. Use context clues, and if anything, circle that word and come back to it later. I guarantee you that you'll still, in your short-term memory, you'll still have enough of the context to where once you look up the definition of the word, you're going to say, okay, now I get that whole passage or whatever. And this will help you from going down rabbit holes. But just be alone, you and the book and your pens and pencils, and constantly reevaluate your calculations and reading goals. Maybe you've gotten to a part where it was so engaging and so good and you had the time that you just blazed through 75 pages. Recalculate your reading goals. Maybe now you only have to read 12 pages a day, and so on. Also don't get worried if you get bogged down in a certain part. Try your best. Reread a passage if you've completely lost the thread. Instead of just some advice people say, just plow on through just to get the flavor of it. I see that to a degree, because really most of these books are worthy of rereading, but at least make sure you have the thread, or else it's just going to be this snowball effect. The tools you'll want your highlighter, your post-it tabs, your micron pens, your notebook. Write in your books, mark them up, circle words you don't understand, put question marks in there, put exclamation marks in there. At the end, the process, once in your established reading time, read through your target pages for the day. Let's say it's 20 pages. You've just read your 20 pages. During that time, highlight the things that stood out, whether good or bad. Maybe something that you totally think is off the wall, or something that you really liked because it agrees with the way you view things, or just maybe you like the way it was said. Don't get snagged on anything, just make notes of those snags. Make sure you read at a level to where you keep the thread. You pretty much know what's going on. Even if you can't explain it, you kind of get the gist. You're not totally lost. Or else I do argue for going back and trying to at least make sure you know who's talking, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of your reading for the day, go back and annotate all of your highlights. That means, for example, right now I'm reading through Aristotle's Ethics. On my first read, I just go through and highlight. On my second read, not on my second read, but then I go back and I annotate those highlights. And then finally, in my journal, what I do is, in a different color pen, this being red, I go through and I write out a brief summary of what I just read. So this is, I mean, this is like, grade school writing. But there's a reason that stuff is taught. Whether it's taught well or not, or you even care about it at that age, is a different matter. But this will help you stay in the book, stay engaged, instead of merely checking off your list of 20 pages a day and then going on with your life. You're reading them, but you're also having that conversation. Highlighting the things that stand out, that's your good listening. Don't annotate yet. Come back and annotate later, because that's you letting the book finish what it has to say and then you responding. And then finally, that summary at the end is critical, because then you can take all those cumulative summaries and start to work on your review of the book and see what you really did get out of it. Without that history of all of your annotations, it could be that the last 50 pages put such a bad taste in your mind that you write the book off, even if you've enjoyed some highlights that you've now forgotten. There are 3 general stages of reading that you're going to go through. There's the beginning. It's sort of like a relationship. There's the beginning, where there's this excitement. There's a thrill of the fact that you're reading XYZ. The thrill of the fact that, oh my goodness, I am starting in on the first page of Infinite Jest, and I'm actually going to read it. I'm going to join this elite club or whatever. On the first sitting with a big book, I argue that you should plan it out in such a way to where you can get through 50 pages of it. Or at least 30, because you need to really get the flavor of it. Let it wash over you, let it overwhelm you if it needs to, but that's enough to where you haven't just taken a dip into it, but you've really kind of made a connection, and you've said to the other person, hey, I'm willing to invest in this relationship too. In the middle, you're gonna get bogged down probably here and there, because that realization that this relationship is taking time and actual effort may challenge you as far as whether you're ready for commitment. But go back and watch this video from the beginning if you want to remind yourself of all the reasons why. Towards the end, in the last, what I call the 100-page stretch, you may end up with a form of senioritis. And you're going to start having these thoughts like, I've made it this far. Perhaps that's enough to where I can basically say that I've read this book. I pretty much get what's going on now. Do I really need to finish it? And then what happens is laziness sets in, fatigue sets in, and then quality of reading starts to drop, and you start going on autopilot. Be a good partner in the relationship, and continue to give that same amount of attention that you did at the very beginning. Take a deep breath. Continue to push aside distractions and say, you know what? I'm down to 100 pages. Recalculate daily goals based on that if you need to. But say, you know what? I'm in the last 100 pages and I want to finish this race well. I don't just want to start it well and then, crawl through the finish line exhausted. And then look back with regret, wishing you had done it. Like, do it now, put the effort in now, cast off senioritis and say, you know what, the author took the time to finish this huge capstone off. I'm going to take, just as much effort to see what's going on here. Plus, the ending may completely change everything else, and you've just missed out on something great. So then a couple of just tips, odds and ends tips. Commit to finishing the book without understanding all of its possibilities. Here, these days, we've been trained to be literary critics, fully engaged literary critics, every moment of reading a book. And one of the things that has done is it's made us chase down every single word and exhaust it of its possibilities, every single symbol that comes up. Again, this is having a bad conversation with the book in a way, because with every word it's saying, as the words are, going past your eyes, your mind is going here, there, and everywhere and coming up with what you want to say about what's being said. So just commit to finishing it. I'm going to finish it. I'm not going to be able to exhaust all of its possibilities, but I'll reread it at some point. Write in your book. Again, I can't stress this enough. Make the book your own. It will become this historical conversation or this historical relationship that took place. And mark the date that you read it. in there, so that then when you go back in 10 years, you'll say, oh my goodness, you'll be seeing this conversation you had and you'll see how you've grown, or how the book changes and so on. Again, focus only on this book. Don't start making reading plans with other books. And the final tip that I'll give is seek accountability. Maybe there's someone else who wants to read the book too. Maybe there's a Twitter reading group, an Instagram reading group, a series of YouTube videos that does a read along, that'll help keep you engaged. Maybe there's a blog that posts a chapter a day and so on. Some parting thoughts. In Plato's Republic, there's a refrain that says, nothing great is easy. And then Karen Swallow Pryor from her book on reading well. I've used this many times. It's in my, my video about books on reading. It's like 31 books on reading, and it's at the end of my Fathers and Crows video. But these 3 quotes are perfect to keep in mind for reading big books. First, it is not enough to read widely. One must also read well. And big books will help you more than any other books learn to read well. It's not just about plowing through as many books as you can. Second quote, the greatest pleasures are those born of labor and investment. And finally, demand books that make demands on you. So I hope this has helped you. In the comments, for me and for others, let me know your tips on reading big books. Tell me the huge books that you really want to get around to. And let's talk about this.